Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have the opportunity in our life to recognize what our nature is like. We also have the opportunity in our life to learn a set of biblical or godly values. But those values trump your nature. And this nice little formula up here takes a lifetime to get down. It's easy for me to say, well, because it's right, I will therefore do it. However, I can tell you that in things like diet, exercise, sleep, most of us don't. We go, yes, the Twinkie is wrong, but I want the Twinkie, okay? And that's just the way it is. By the way, Twinkie is going to start making bread. Can you imagine that? They're going to take the bakery for Twinkies and they're going to make them make bread. That just seems wrong to me. Here they are taking a sacred food and turning it into, never mind. All right, what I want to do is take a look in chapter 49 at one of those chapters you've actually heard of in your Bible, probably never heard preached, and probably didn't know what you were going to do with. So let's just take a look at it and see if we can figure out why God spent this time to tell us very carefully what Jacob did with his children. I'm going to presuppose that you know that the list over there are other blessings, and that the blessings, the poetic blessings that are given in Scripture, are given with intent. There's a reason why fathers blessed their children. Today, if you go to a Sabbath meal, you will find that there are three blessings. A blessing to God over the bread, a blessing to God over the cup. That is, blessing God for the bread, blessing God for the cup. The bread being what I told you earlier. What's it represent? Needs. Look at that. You got it, buddy. Okay, bread is needs. Your cup is what? Okay, more, yeah, not your wants, but your joys, right? Yeah, okay. All right, Andrew. That was pretty good. That wasn't bad. The idea that God gave me, He gave wine for the joys of men. God didn't just provide me a vehicle of transport. I have air conditioning. I have AM/FM stereo. I have a stereo in my car that is better than the stereo I grew up with in my house. And so we have all these extra things that I don't need them. Anybody calls a microwave a need, it means you were born too late, okay? Something's wrong. But there's a lot of things that become such luxuries. Then the third blessing is I go around and I put my hand on each of my children and I bless God for my child out loud. Now, what does that do? Well, imagine you grew up week after week hearing your father pronounce how he blesses God for the unique person that you are. Imagine that he had to come up with something different week after week to say about you that he was thankful for. How many of you think that would have made me a stronger person? I would argue that one of the reasons that although the Jewish people are a small percentage of the people of the earth, they have a large percentage, an inordinately large percentage of things like Nobel Prizes, is because they were born and raised in confident homes. Blessing offers confidence. It's one of the things it does. It also can be a prophetic moment. God spoke through Jacob in the lives of his kids. And I want you to understand that the last words of a person are often very significant. When somebody's lying there dying and they're talking to you, you tend to listen more carefully than you would if it's just, a Tuesday afternoon and you're like, hey, how you doing? So take a look at chapter 49. I want you to put Jacob kind of old and trembling. I think Jacob's got to be thinking as he's laying on his bed about his dad and when he saw Isaac. But this time it's not about what the child is doing for the father, it's about what the father's doing for the child. Jacob summoned his sons, said, assemble yourselves that I may tell you what will befall in the days to come. That's how you know that he understands what he's about to do to be prophetic. He says, I'm going to tell you about the future. Now this isn't every blessing in the Bible. In fact, many of them don't fall into this. But Jacob had a walk with God. And by now, Jacob had a sensitivity to what God was doing. Did some of his comments come from observing the kids? I think so. I don't think that it has to be like, woo, spooky. I think it can be, he saw some things. And some of those were character statements, or can we say nature statements? And some of what he wanted to do was say, look, kid, you got this kind of nature. And I'm going to be the guy who tells you this doesn't end well if that's the nature that you go with. So some of these are going to be positive, but not all of them. Verse 2, gather together, hear O sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel your father. Notice that verse 2 is laid out differently in your Bible than verse 1. Is it? It should be. Okay, that's because beginning with verse 2 begins the poem. And poetry is inset, and it always looks different than the narrative. So verse 1 looks like something that was Moses. I think verse 2 is the poem passed to the children from Jacob. I think there was a way they remembered what Jacob said. I think it was poetic. I don't think any one of them had to remember all the poetry. I think they all remembered the part that was about them. When someone's reading the will, the part you're interested in is the part you're getting stuff. Okay? So I think this is the last will and testament of Jacob, still read while Jacob is yet still alive. And it's in poetic form. Now look at Reuben for a minute. The first of his sons he named Reuben. Look, a son. Remember? This is the joy of Leah. This is back when Leah's trying to win her man away from Rachel, and she's doing it and using her children to try and get him. In a way, he was not going to live his life in the blessing that was intended for that role. We've already established that. We're going to call him a son of privilege. Now, this is what I mean. First, look at what he says about him. He says, Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength, preeminent in dignity, preeminent in power, uncontrolled as water. You shall not have preeminence, because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch. Look at that. I would put next to, by the way, verse 4, next to verse 4, 35:22. And I want you to see that this uncontrolled as water is also, you might put Judges chapter 5, verse 16. This comes up later as a poetic expression. In Judges 5, it seems, Judges 5:16, in Judges 5, it seems to mean indecisive. So look at what he says. He says, I want you to understand that you're not going to have the preeminence that goes with where you are. I want you to understand that your lack of respect follows you. And by the way, it follows him in the life of his children. His hunger to have the acceptance of his brothers more than hungering to obey his father made him choose not to protect his brother Joseph. Reuben didn't do what he should have done in Joseph's life because he was more worried about the crowd. Listen to me. Reuben is the test case for a guy who says he's a leader by taking polls on his leadership. You're not leading if you're afraid of the people you're leading. If you need to take a poll about what your values should be, then you're not the leader, because the poll tells you what other people think. So Reuben thinks he's the leader, wants to be the leader, but doesn't actually lead. He didn't learn to bridle his need for affirmation. That is his problem. Guys, bridle your need for affirmation. Do not get your values from what everybody else will laugh at or what everybody else will think is good. Unless you stand up to that early, you're going to find that the failure to break the hunger of peer acceptance is deadly. In this case, it kills blessing. The second thing I notice is that he failed to learn discipline of his own body. So he didn't have the appropriate limitations on his sexual activity. If people are not fundamentally called to live opposite of how the fallen world thinks, they're going to give in. Here's the thing that people aren't saying out in our society. Most of the great accomplishments of the West have happened because of disciplines that were counter our nature. And yet what you're seeing is, let's just legalize. Let's just tell them they're right. Whatever they feel, let them have it. There's never been a society that was built on undiscipline. And the term adult has somehow been prostituted to mean some of the most sexually perverse, when it started off being those who knew how to discipline themselves. So here's my question. First of all, have you bridled your affirmation? And second, have you bridled your body? Does it do what you tell it, or do you feed it whatever junk it seems to be asking for? Because I'm too tired, so I let it sleep. Some of you, literally at 20 years of age, are not telling your body when to go to sleep. You are staying up way too late because you are letting your body run you to the ground. Here's my word, stop. You have to you need to settle down. You need to go to sleep. You need to get up when the alarm goes off. There are habits that some of you have that are hurting you. Do not be checking your phone at 3 a.m. There's no one decent talking about anything important at 3 a.m. You're not running a country. When you get to be president, then we want you to get up at 3 a.m. and take the call. You're not running the country. I'm telling you this for a reason. Some of you are not using the disciplines you need in order to be successful at what you're doing. The serious people in this world are not sitting on social media giving their opinions 9 hours a day. The serious people that are accomplishing ministry in this world don't have the number of levels you have in the latest game. You want to be serious, you're going to have to take some discipline steps. That's just going to be true. I don't mean to be the killjoy here. I'm just saying there's balance, and then there's what happens in people's lives. If you can be 8 hours still sitting in the chair like this, something's wrong. And can I tell you, guys, that's a real turnoff. The last thing a girl wants is a guy who's going to come in and play Nintendo 9 hours a day. I don't know any girl that signs up and puts that on the list of things she's looking for in a man. Has attained the highest level in the following games. Okay? Let me just say, Reuben thought he was entitled to have more because God had blessed him as firstborn. It's possible that some of you got the idea that somehow you came from a place where God is going to give you more, and so you don't have to work as hard. I'm going to tell you something, and I tell you these biographical things. I hope you understand how I mean them. I wasn't the smartest kid in the class, ever. I was the kid who worked harder than the smartest kid in the class, so I got a better grade than them. Because I figured I did not have the mind for it, but I did have the hustle for it. Here's what I've learned in life. I'm telling you seriously, you can out-hustle the smartest person in the room. Because most people won't give 100%. They just won't. And honestly, in every job I had a delightful time in that job because I was not trying to meet the standard of the company. The standard of the company was so far behind where I was trying to meet, I was trying to do it better than it had ever been done. If I buff a floor, you will see a shine on that floor no one's ever seen on that floor. I use buffing floors because it's my favorite job ever. If I could just be a floor buffer. I love it. I can buff floors through the night. I can work all day and buff floors through the night. I like it that much. There's something wonderful about just saying, I have made floor shine. Remember the people get peopled out. And if you do people work, things don't get better at increments that make sense. You go 3 steps forward, 2.5, 2 3/4, 2 9/10 backward. And you think you're doing really well, and you end up backward. So one of the things you have to do, if you're the kind of person who needs to accomplish, is get a hobby that has nothing to do with what you're doing in your job. Okay? I think Reuben was a guy who felt privileged. And I think that one of the things that happened is his dad went back and he said to him very specifically, you are not disciplined. You expected to be preeminent. Your lack of discipline cut out your preeminence. It's not going to happen for you. Now, Keep going, and let's go to the next two. Did you notice Simeon and Levi are together in the same verse? I call these the unbridled sons. I want you to look at them for just a second. Simeon, God heard, and Levi, apportioned or joined. And here's the reason I call them the unbridled sons. First, let's take a look at the text. It says, Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are implements of violence. Let my soul not enter into their counsel. Let my glory be united with their assembly, because in their anger they slew men, and in their self-will they lamed oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will disperse them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Now, you're going to know that the Levites, of course, were scattered quite intentionally, right? And this is the root of how that fits. But just like his older sibling, these sons followed suit in an unbridled way. They are brothers is an expression like, do you know the expression two peas in a pod? That's what I think he's saying when he says they're brothers. They're all brothers. But he's trying to say these two, they're brothers. What does he mean? They were cut from the same cloth. They got the same problem. I think what's interesting is that they were the ones who deceived the sons of Shem in 34:25, and they were forced to scatter throughout Israel and Judah. Levi was deliberately scattered. Simeon was amalgamated into the southern part of Judah, and by Numbers 18, Simeon is actually part of Judah. Simeon originally got the Negev, the southlands, but they eventually just got swallowed up by Judah, and Simeon is no more. No one thinks they came from the tribe of Simeon because Judah took over Simeon. And it's all rooted in this promise. Let me say it this way. These are the hothead brothers. They needed to be separated because what do you do when you get hotheads? You don't put them together. They feed each other. You got to separate them. If we desire to satiate our anger by taking it out on others, we're going to end up isolated. We have to give mercy to get mercy. We have to govern extreme emotions or it's going to cost future blessing. Unbridled sons never defeat their tantrums. It's one of the reasons when a child throws a tantrum at 2, and they all throw tantrums at 2, you have got to get to the place where you do not let them control you by their tantrum. Because at 26, they'll still be doing it. And the fact of the matter is you are working alongside of people in offices and on shop floors who threw tantrums, whose mommy bent the world to get them to stop the tantrum. I remember the story of Jim Dobson when he was head of the Focus on the Family. He used to tell about this one particular girl that she would go through the store, and if she didn't get whatever she wanted, she'd threaten to take all her clothes off. I'm just going to take all my clothes off. And so she went with her mom, and her mom would always try not to, just give her whatever. Well, one day, she forgot who she was with. She went to the store with her dad. Coming back in the door, the mother was startled because the father was holding a naked child in one hand and all the clothes in the other. And she said, "What is going on?" She said, "She threatened if I didn't give her that balloon, she would take her clothes off." And I said, "Okay, you're going to look stupid. Feel free." So she did. The mother said, the interesting thing is she never did it again. Somebody called her bluff. And she didn't know she was going to feel dumb. As long as they think they got a chain around your neck, they're going to yank that chain. And what's interesting is these unbridled sons, they never got it. They don't learn to rein in their hot tempers, and they believe a lie. If they explode, they'll feel better. That's a lie. If they explode, they'll feel better for a moment. And then they'll start working toward the next explosion. The problem is people get hurt in explosions. So we're just going to leave them as that next group of unbridled ones. Unless there's a question, I'm going to just keep pouring right through these. Is that okay? The next one is an interesting guy, Judah. We got something to say about Judah because we got a story on Judah, right? There's a few things we'd like to call him. But son of direction? Let me tell you why I said that. The fourth son had a name that was embedded with blessing. Judah means what? Praise. And he was named after Leah's conclusion that she needed to be okay with what God made her and stop trying to get Jacob in her bed and stop trying to get Jacob to love her more than he loved Rachel. That wasn't going to happen, and using children to get the man was the wrong-headed thing to do. So finally she stops and says, let me call this one praise, and quit for a while. She comes back to the problem, but at least for the time being, she seems to have overcome it. She figured out that nobody could complete her. That God alone had to complete her. Now, look at verse 8. Judah, your brothers shall praise you. What's he doing? That's a play on words, right? Praise, your brothers are going to praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down to you. That means your brothers, right? Why doesn't he say your brothers? Because then we'd have a distinction between brothers and half-brothers. And he says, Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He couches, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion, who dares rouse him up? Now watch. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. He ties his foal to the vine, and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He washes his garments in wine, and his robes are in the blood of grapes. His eyes are dull from wine, and his teeth white from milk. Okay, are we all on the page of, wow, this is poetry? Okay, stop for a second, and let me tell you what I did with it. In 43:3, Judah became the spokesman of the family on the way to Egypt, right? Do you remember the story? And before the unrecognized Joseph, Judah was the person who was for a while poetically leading. A lion's whelp is a poetic reference to reigning. It's a symbol of sovereignty. And you'll see it throughout the Bible, but you see it throughout poetry. Generally, a lion is considered a king or a ruler. And you'll see whether it's the city of Florence or whether it's people having them outside their front door in Philadelphia, you see them all over the world. It means protection, but it generally also means someone in charge. What I think is interesting is that the picture of Judah as lion is also going to be used prophetically. I would put next to that, if I were you, Numbers 24:9, Numbers 24:9, Ezekiel 19, and Micah 5. Numbers 24:9, Ezekiel 19, and Micah 5. The other tribes are going to follow him, and he would be left alone as a lion in wait. Like he himself would be one that would endure beyond all the other animals of the jungle, if I can say it that way. I also think that there's a very important saying here, and we've got to be able to step back and see it. The verse 10 looks like it's a messianic promise. So this appears to me to be one of the early messianic promises. It's not the first one. Where's the first one? The woman with seed, right? But this one is the scepter shall not depart from Judah. That is, the symbol of rulership of Judah will not be taken away until what? Yeah, this word Shiloh is like a word from, do you know the word Siloam, the Siloam pool in the New Testament? It comes from the same word. Shiloh is like to catch, a catcher, okay? It's the one who catches. Here, it appears as though well, somebody go to Ezekiel 21:27 for a minute. So hold your finger here, go to Ezekiel 21:27. And somebody read that verse. Yeah, actually 26 and 27. 21, 26 and 27. Ezekiel. In Ezekiel, the writer is talking, it's a section where Zedekiah, who's the last king of Judah, is to take off the crown. And there's going to be a crown placed back on the head of someone for Judah, but he's not there yet. So Ezekiel's prophesying of the one who will take the crown. This phrase, until Shiloh comes, tells us that that the rulership, the rightful symbol of rulership, whether it be a crown or a scepter, won't pass from Judah until the one that comes. And what's the end point in verse 10? He comes, and how do you know it's the right guy? What is the thing he has to fulfill? The obedience of the peoples. So there's going to come a king at some point in the future, and he's going to capture the hearts of people, and they're actually going to obey him. Now, what's interesting is then he goes on and he starts talking about, he ties his foal to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. Is he talking now about the son? Is he talking about Judah, or is he talking about this one that's coming? That's what we don't know. That's what's hard to determine. But it looks like what he's saying is that this one would come, people would obey him, and then if you follow the line that the Shiloh is the one who ties his donkey to the vine and washes his teeth with milk, there's unparalleled prosperity as a result of him. Let me say it this way. If you take 10 and 11 to mean Messiah, then there's two things that we know about Messiah. He's going to come before the Judah scepter passes away. Now that would be normally, you'd look at that if you were Jewish and say, well, that would be up until the captivity, right? But wait a minute, the Jewish people were back in the land, ruling the land again. The records of who's a Judahite were lost in the Roman period just after the life of Jesus. So as a Christian, what I think he's saying is, the scepter won't depart from Judah, and meaning the rulership and the passing of it, until the Messiah comes, and Messiah is going to come and bring with him the ability to call people to obedience, and they're going to obey him, and sometime subsequently later, he's going to bring back unparalleled prosperity. It doesn't tell you there's two comings, but clearly, if you know there are, they're both there. Does that make sense? I'm not trying to stretch it. I'm just trying to say that would be the classical understanding of Christian scholars, and most of them would say what I just said if you go to the vast majority of commentaries. So it looks like verses 10 and 11 aren't about Judah, they're about Shiloh. In other words, Judah isn't going to be disbanded until we know who Messiah is. Okay? Any other questions about that one? That's a little bit obscure, and you're after lunch, and so I think you're just trying to stay alive. Okay, let us continue. Let's go right away to a fun one. Zebulun will dwell at the seashore. So we're picturing a guy on a hammock with a guitar. And he shall be a haven for ships, and his flank shall be towards Sidon. Here's what I know. I know that Zebulun would look to the sea and not to the land for his wealth and possession. And you have to understand, Middle Easterners don't do sea. You are not going to find 5 Arab swim teams at the next Olympics. They don't do water. They do sand. If there was a sand swimming, maybe. So here's what I'm saying. The focus of his blessing was on where he would be, not what he would be. Did you notice? This doesn't sound like the other ones. This one is all about where his orientation is going to make him just a little bit different, and it's going to cause him to be separate from his brothers in the way that he thinks. I don't know if you know this. Maybe you have seafaring people in your family. Seafarers are different than landlubbers. They don't think the same way. And so he says, you're going to be angled toward the sea. Now, here's what I know. This guy's an inquisitive youth. He had the heart of an explorer. His choices were going to bring him moments of exhilaration that his brothers would never quite understand, because he's going to be angled to a different kind of life than all of his brothers. But here's the thing. He wanted something different than others, but he would add something to his family that no one else could. I don't know. Some of you may be a son or daughter of exploration. You're the one that doesn't have to be with the rest of the family at the holiday. You're really okay with being in some obscure place. And you have a purpose for what you do. But your life is formed more around where you are, where you place yourself, than who you came from, who your people are. Some of you are just the opposite. You are so much your mother. You are so much your family. And when you get out from underneath your family, you're almost going, man, I just can't wait till the next family vacation. Some of you are going, oh, please, I can live a long time before another family vacation. There's just different kids. You came out of the box that way. And what I want you to see is God didn't treat the creative explorer child as a problem. He made the man to add something unique to the whole scene. He used the man in important ways, but few people would ever hear of it. You know why? Because explorer children are often like that. They go out and do the cool thing, but only 3 people ever knew about it. Okay? If that's you, get used to it. You can own one of these. Okay? Let's go to the nearsighted son. This is the kid with the Coke bottle glasses in the elementary school pictures. Issachar. Don't you love this? As he's laying there, Issachar, you're a strong donkey. Okay. Lying down between the sheepfolds. When he saw that a resting place was good and that the land was pleasant, he bowed his shoulder to bear burdens, and he became a slave at forced labor. This is a nearsighted son. What do I mean by that? Issachar was happy to work hard and to accomplish, but he was not shrewd. So he saw what he wanted, and when he could have it right now, he didn't plan for the future. He just simply used what was in front of him. He worked, bearing the load of burden on the fields, and then rested where he could, enjoying the fruits of the labor with no plan for the future. And he quickly became what anyone becomes when they concentrate on short-term satisfaction: a slave of other big companies. And all of a sudden, he got a credit card, he charged up what he thought would make him happy, and he didn't worry about a plan, and he became the servant of the bank. That's him. He lacked a plan to defend himself, resting in comforts and waking up to find himself enslaved. And failure to protect early left him vulnerable to people with sharper minds. You know tons of these guys. You know tons of them. They're people that will just do whatever's necessary. They're your good workaday people, but they're locked into a system and they're never going to get out of it simply because they're not shrewd, but they are honest, hardworking people. Not everybody's cut out to be the head of the company. Not everybody's supposed to be the leader. They're supposed to be followers. So God gave him a place of blessing, but he wanted too much too fast. I want you to watch Issachar, because some of you have a headstrong nature to want what you want too much right now. That's the strong donkey in you. Hee-haw. Here's the thing. You'll be fine, but don't focus too much on your current pleasure. Don't just think short term. If there's anything I could give you as a disciple, it would be this. Don't think short term. Think in eternity, not in short-term thinking. Short-term thinking is what's killing our country, because we're thinking in 2- and 4-year segments instead of 20- and 40-year segments. Don't take on wars you can't finish in 2 years, because some people have been around fighting for 500. You might be careful about that. Let me go to son of disruption, since we have no disruptors. Dan shall judge his people. As one of the tribes of Israel, Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a horned snake in the path, that bites the horse's heels so that his rider falls backward. For your salvation I wait, O Lord. What is that? Well, here's the thing. Dan becomes a barometer of the family, living first near the Philistine plain. You got to remember where Dan actually got his first living. Dan was originally given a territory right here. This is all Philistines. What happens to the tribe that inhabits the hill that looks at the Philistines? Do you know that there was not a single African ever who was unhappy about not having TV until they saw one? People aren't upset about what they don't have until they know they don't have it, and you do. Here's the problem with living in the mountains, looking at the people who have when you don't. Then you decide you want to be them. And Dan lost this territory to them. They took it over, and Dan ended up way up here, taking an area all the way at the north part of the country. we're going to follow Dan as they get kicked out of their original allotment. So knowing that, I want you to know that they become a barometer of the family. Who are the children of Dan? A fellow by the name of Shimshon or Samson. There's a classic Danite in Judges 13. What's Samson's problem? It's certainly not gym time. He's doing fine. What's his problem? Self-control would definitely be on the list of problems. I mean, it's not bad enough that he's got the coolest hairstyle in town and the biggest muscles. He's got to also have the girl, right? And the thing about him is he plays around with what's holy. God told him, don't cut your hair. So he gets into a little debating society with Delilah about, well, if I'm tied up this way and they get me, then I won't be able to get out of it. And then, about the third time that woman set you up, would you stop playing around with it already? Here's the thing. I want you to see that from the tribe of Dan, some things are going to happen. One of them, Dan is going to lose his territory. He's going to be forced to move to the northern border. He's going to become the first of the high places against the temple. Do you know where the first golden calf was? In the city called Dan. And here's the thing. When you take a look at this, tell me what the horse and the biting and the falling backward is. Dan, your kids are going to set up a golden calf. You're going to end up throwing the rider off on the ground. You're going to get struck by your own snake. Dan, failure to stand on your own is going to cost you even your own family. You're going to go into captivity to the Assyrians and you're going to have your name lost. Let me say it this way. When a son or daughter compromises in moral areas, they cause pain and problems for the rest of the family. Do you guys know that? Do you have an older brother or sister that compromised morally and that really brought it down on your parents and you watched the pain? It's hard. You die 1,000 deaths with your kids. And one of the things that happens is you're trying your best to get them to live up to what's good for them. So one of the questions I always have to ask myself when I look at Dan is I have to say, am I really walking in harmony with my values? Or am I so concerned about what I want that my values are no longer, my character is no longer important? Okay, let me go on to Gad, son of courage. He's not a major player in any of the parts of the Hebrew Bible. Here's what I love about Gad. There's really not a lot to say about Gad, really. There are a couple exceptional places when his courage stands out, and that's what I want you to see. I want you to mark next to verse 19, 1 Chronicles 5 and 1 Chronicles 12. These are the two times you will see Gad. And here's the reason I had to go to 1 Chronicles to make sense of this passage. Because there's almost nothing about Gad in the Bible. So I picked out the only two passages I could find where he does anything, where the tribe of Gad is actually a player. So watch this. First, verse 19 says, as for Gad, raiders shall raid him, but he will raid at their heels. Meaning, he's going to get hit, but he's going to hit back hard. You don't want to punch Gad unless you want to wake up laying on the ground. Because you'll punch him, but he'll hit you back hard. So here's in 1 Chronicles 5, it says, 5:18, 1 Chronicles 5:18. The sons of Reuben and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh, consisting of valiant men, men who bore shield and sword and shot with bow and were skillful in battle, were 44,760 who went to war. 1 Chronicles 5:20. They were helped against them, for they cried out to God in the battle, and he answered their prayers because they trusted him. 1 Chronicles 5 is a story about how Gad, along with the other tribes, were actually hit really hard and how they struck back. Gad's attacked, but he fought for freedom and he did it valiantly. And his children suffered from invasions, but he fought back every time. In 1 Chronicles 12, here's another story. 1 Chronicles 12:8. From the Gadites there came over to David in the stronghold in the wilderness mighty men of valor, men trained for war, who could handle shield and spear, and whose faces were like the faces of lions, and they were as swift as the gazelles on the mountains. 12:14 says, these of the sons of Gad were captains of the army. He who was least was equal to 100, and the greatest equal to 1,000. What does that tell you? Gad's men were known like the Spartans of the Bible. They were the guys, They could handle it. They could get taken on. They were the tough guys. And what I think you're seeing is God made of them a few, but they were skilled and they were courageous. They knew God, and they knew the grit of battle, and they could use their hands to pray or to punish. Their courage was etched into their faces, and people counted on Gad for defense, and they counted on him for courage, and they counted on him for standing up to all those that would attack them. I got to tell you something. I am not a child of Gad, but I'm sure glad that in some places right now around America and around the world there are Gadites. I don't know a nice way to say this. I don't want Marines to be nice. I want them to be unbelievably, mind-numbingly tough. You know, Sylvester Stallone used to make movies where he would like sew himself when his flesh was cut up. That's what I'm looking for. I want that guy right there. I don't want bodyguards that are going, ew, icky, you know. No, I want the one that walks through walls. And Gadites are people of incredible courage. Now, some of you may be them. I think courage is a dulled sense of danger. I think that some people should know that that's really going to hurt, but they don't care. I got to tell you, paper cuts bother me. That's how courageous I am. Asher was the culinary artist of the group. He was a fine chef. He would dwell in the land with great ingredients and produce incredible flavor profiles. Listen to this. As for Asher, as for happy, as for gladness, his food shall be rich, and he will yield royal dainties. Now, I know you hear dainties and you picture ballerinas. That's not what he's saying. He's saying he'd have fat bread. In the Hebrew, it's literally, he would dip his bread in oil. He would have fat bread. He'd live a great life. He would produce the food that was fit for a king's table. By the way, the prophetess Anna in Luke 2 comes from Asher. Just one of the few people that you can, you're grabbing at straws for Asher because you don't have a lot of good stories. But God prepared a place of extravagance for him. As with all the children of extravagance, Asher's going to suffer some hardships more deeply because he's not used to hardship. Guys, some of you have had a great life. Can I see the great life, people? Okay? If you got taken into captivity, it would be harder for you than other people. Why? Because they don't have hair dryers in captivity. They don't have the makeup that doesn't upset my skin. I need a certain one, Mom. What I really think is great about this is, you know, you have to know that the creative children are often some of the delightful ones, and they produce something special. I think the yield royal dainties means they're going to produce something that's unusual and special. Let's get down to the wanderer. Oh, he's fun. Most families have a Naphtali in the family. He or she is the struggler because they are prone to wander. You find them as toddlers in the strip mall far from Mom as she tearfully panics looking for them, okay? And you may have been this one. They march to their own drummer. They're just the kid who just never got with the tune of everyone else. And they're going in a direction away from the rest of the family. They learn to navigate the cliffs and take chances that scare the rest of us. That's just what they do. But they produce things of great beauty. Look at Naphtali. Naphtali, struggle, wrestling, son of Bilhah, right? He is a doe let loose. He gives beautiful words. You know two things about him. What is a doe let loose? Can I just use the words hard to nail down? Okay? You let a doe loose and they're going to take off. And it's almost like Naphtali would be about words and movement, eloquence and swiftness, not locked down easily. His children would be verbal, talented, mobile, and effective. One very special warning about wanderers. Just be careful. Having been one, can I tell you what you have to learn? You have to learn to focus, and you have to learn how to fit in. God may call you to be a wanderer, but you also have to know how to come home and how to fit back in. And that's not as easy as it sounds. Failure to focus is going to keep you from any long-term gain associated with success. It's not zooming across that makes you successful unless you happen to be an Olympic runner. And that's going to be 10 minutes of your life that frames what everybody knows about you. You realize that Olympic person is doing years of life of back training for 10 minutes, and that they're writing their tombstone right there. Gold medalist. You got to have incredible focus to decide that that's going to be enough for you. Wanderers are people that, how many of you spend time flipping through places you want to go and have a long bucket list? Anybody like that? I do a lot of this, okay? I work in travel. I get the fun of going, I can tell you who's running cheap fares next week and where they're going. Because I watch. Why? Because I do. It's a hobby. The steadfast son. Now let's go to Joseph. Yosef, he shall add, son of Rachel. Some of our children seem to get it even before we train them. Some of you were like this. How many of you are first children? Who's the first children? Okay, this section, a lot of you guys, honestly, you kind of like started raising the other kids even before you had to. And for a lot of first children, they sort of get it almost before we tell them, partly because we have inordinate amounts of time and take lots of pictures of you because you're first. I'm a third child. There are no pictures. I'm not bitter. Seriously, there is one lousy picture of me before school. Come on. At any rate, some of you know how to deal with things before we train you, and you understand the benefits of consistency and resilience even when you're beat down. And Joseph certainly is this. He produces against the odds. Look at Joe. It says, Joseph is a fruitful bow. I think that's funny because he only had 2 boys at that time. A fruitful bow by a spring. Its branches run over the wall. The archers bitterly attacked him and shot at him and harassed him, but his bow remained firm, and his arms were agile from the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. From there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. From the God of your father who helps you, and by the Almighty who blesses you with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breasts and of the womb. The blessings of your father have surpassed the blessings of my ancestors up to the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. May they be on the head of Joseph and on the crown of the head of the one of the distinguished among his brothers. I pick him out as the steadfast one because God's use of Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and they're going to be steadfast warriors. When you go through the rest of the Hebrew scriptures, you're going to find whenever they field a big army, Ephraim and Manasseh are going to be a big part of it. They're your backbone soldiers. They really are. And what's interesting is it seems like he's indicating that Joseph is going to fight divine battles, that there's going to be strong things, and they're going to suffer injury, but they're going to stand successfully against many, and they're going to gain a lot of blessing. So let me just offer one scriptural word of qualification about the steadfast son. Failure to follow God's word is going to thwart any demonstrable effect God will have on your life. You don't follow God, and it doesn't matter that you had a great promise. Some of you are coming out of the gate with incredible families, loving parents, and a solid upbringing. And if you don't follow God, do not count on that getting you through. Do not count on your mama's faith being the secret to your success. It's not going to be. You're going to have to decide. Some of you come from names that are known, ministry people that other people know. And here's the thing, that puts a special burden on you in some ways, but you can't rest on that. You got to go out and make this next generation your generation. Let me go to the unsettled son so I can get us to the break. 49:27, Benjamin. And of course, he's also from Rachel or Rachel, son of my right hand. Now look, you're thinking Benjamin, he's so warm. He loves Benjamin. He spent so much time. Listen to what he says. He's a ravenous wolf. In the morning, he devours the prey, and in the evening, he divides the spoil. I want you to see that Benjamin was a wolf on the prowl. He was unsatisfied and he was searching for something he couldn't find. He would devour his enemies and divide their spoils, and you'll see that in Judges 20. We're going to see that in Judges 20. I'd put it right next to 49:27, Judges 20. His nature is more seen by like Saul of Tarsus than King Saul. Both of them, by the way, are acclaimed in his ranks. So the Apostle Paul is a Benjamite, but so is King Saul. Let me say this. Failure to settle down is going to keep his family stirred and looking at the future without the present. Some of you have been in a Benjamin stage of life. You've spent the last 20 years getting ready for adulthood. They kept telling you you're going to the next degree, the next thing. And some of you got to be saying, when do I cash in and start like being the adult I've been preparing to be? And here's what I want you to understand. Part of the problem with students is they spend all of their time focusing on the grade terminal evaluation at the end of the semester, so that the semester goes by, but you're never living in the moment. It's always then. I struggle with this because I work in travel, and I got to tell you, if I don't buy these tickets by here, 7 months from now, there's going to be a major blow up in my life. So I live on deadlines that are false and in front of me for things that are in the future, and it's hard to ever be in the moment when you always have a lot of stuff going on. The unsettled son is the person who's always on the prowl and can't settle down. You want to be careful because today needs to be enough. You can't be a ravenous wolf and eat life. Today needs to be enough. You have to be able to stop. I know it's that cliche, smell the roses or whatever. Maybe that's not it. But at least once in a while, see a sunset. You know what helps me? Music. A beautiful piece of music or an incredible piece of art. I like some poetry, but you got to really be good to get me. Painting, sculpture. Sculpture gets me every time. Nothing modern. If I can do it, it's not art. Okay? And I don't want my cows to look like cows. So if it's like, that's not a cow. Okay? That's just like a kid putting clay together. Picasso looks like nonsense to me. I'm not telling you it's not valuable. I'm telling you I don't care. But you get somebody good, and some of the incredible pieces in Florence. My favorite, Michelangelo's The Prisoners. Have any of you seen this? You go into the Accademia, and down at the end is the big, tall David. He's standing there in his great nudeness or whatever. And as you're coming down, everybody's like trying to get over there. I like to stop in the hallway before. These are unfinished pieces where Michelangelo would chip away and then he'd go, yeah, that's done. It's not done. It's clearly not done. There's half of a body emerging from a rock. And he goes, yeah, but that's all that rock is supposed to be. Because he always saw himself not as creating sculpture, but as releasing it from the rock it was in. And I love to stand there and look at those. Whatever it is that will settle you, make sure that it's a part of your life. I'm going to call you to do more than just study the Bible. Yes, you heard me say that. I'm going to call you to do some of the things that feed your soul that help settle you. Do not believe you can find another person who will settle you. They may wear you out, but they will not settle you. And those are two different things. Okay? So, blessings. Do you at least get a sense of what they're about? Don't buy what I'm telling you. Maybe you've got a better line on these. What I did was I studied them and I went around the Bible and tried to figure out where are the Asherites, where are the Gadites, what else do I know about them, and tried to fit that into this thing because at the beginning it says this is what's going to happen to you. So I thought, okay, I should look at what happened to them and try to fit that in there. That's the best I can do with it. Maybe you can do better, and I will be happy if you do. We are one chapter from finishing this book.